This meeting is being recorded.
Everyone behave now.
So we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about how to spot red flags in a curriculum. And the conversation will lead up to and focus on the Reading League's tool, the Curriculum Evaluation Guidelines. So Maria's going to kick us off by just telling you a little bit about the Reading League.
Okay, Carrie, while I do that, can you watch the rapid growing numbers for me?
Yeah.
Okay. So hi, everybody. The Reading League is just about 7 years old, and we are a not-for-profit organization based out of Syracuse, New York. And our mission is to advance the awareness, the understanding, and the use of evidence-aligned reading instruction in schools. So obviously, organization with a mission like that should create a curriculum evaluation tool. It makes perfect sense. So we are knowledge brokers. Our goal is to take the knowledge that's already out there and bring it to any stakeholder that needs to know about it, starting with the classroom educator, other professionals in the schools, administrators, publishers, policymakers, higher ed people, you name it, many more. Okay, thanks, Carrie.
Thanks. So tonight we are going to kick things off by talking about what is the evidence and who should we listen to. Then we're going to dive into the curriculum evaluation guidelines. We're going to talk through the structure. We're going to talk through the content just a bit. We're going to have a few minutes dedicated to answering some questions. And then we're going to give you that fun sneak peek of what's coming next. And if we have time for it, we will head on into discuss some things that sometimes get in the way.
Yep. Carrie, did you tell everyone what you do for the Reading League in case they don't know, because they should? You're awesome.
I'm the director of the National Science of Reading Project. So I spearhead some of these great projects that will eventually hopefully be hosted on an exciting platform on the Reading League website that we will announce hopefully this summer or so. So please follow the Reading League on social media for all of the updates to hear more about that as it comes to fruition.
Thank you. All right, I'll talk a little bit about this slide to kind of give some people who may not be aware of the scope of what we're talking about when we say the science of reading. It is going on 5 decades worth of hundreds of thousands of studies from multiple disciplines. And what is interesting is this quote from Lyon and Chabra: the attainment of reading skill has fascinated psychologists and invited more study than any other aspect of human cognition due to its social importance and its complexity. There's so much to what has to happen to learn to read, write, spell, to assess it, instruct it, etc. And so as a consequence of all these research efforts over many decades, we've got something cool. We've got scientific consensus on some really important issues related to reading development and reading instruction. So that is that. Now, you're not supposed to be able to read all this. We did this on purpose to with small font. In other words, this is just a sampling of the journals, the peer-reviewed journals from where we get from where these research studies are published. So look at the scope. You have brain, you see psychology, you see speech, language, and hearing, and all manner of different countries, Britain, Scandinavia, all around the world. This research has been going on for decades, and for some strange reason, educators who it is for, so that they can do the best job possible and have all the professional knowledge necessary, have been sidelined from it. So that's why the Reading League exists, to try to get that out to you in the form of materials like this we're going to talk about tonight, the journal, conference and all other kinds of things that we can talk about another time. Okay. There's that. I have with me, never go anywhere without it. Actually, I'm flying tomorrow somewhere and I have one in my plane bag, my carry-on, because I might sit near someone who needs to hear this. But this is a defining guide. That it's another resource that we created. That's one of the first projects I did with Carrie before she even came to work for us. And you can download a free copy of this or purchase a hard copy like the one in my hand. And this started out with an intent to just define what do we mean by the science of reading. And it ended up being a little tiny tangible book. And people use it for their school boards, for community organizations.
I have a webinar I have to hop on.
To give to all of their superintendents in their state, et cetera. So it's really done well to help clarify what has become a catchphrase in education, this term science of reading. So we try to simplify it here. That's something else we have for you. Okay.
So the project of this defining guide began with a group of folks that said, all right, we are seeing this phrase being used and tossed around. And this was years ago. This was a couple of years ago. We saw it slapped on curriculum in the form of a sticker, fresh, hot, off the press, the science of reading. This is the science of reading. Come and get it, ladies and gentlemen. And we said, that's a problem. We need to clarify what the science of reading is. So we need to know what the science of reading is. So we need to define it. So that was a really easy process, right, Maria? It took us no time at all getting getting 20 experts on a Zoom and creating a definition. Of course, if you look at the defining guide and you see the group at the end, you can see why we had to do much more than just a definition. So we are not going to get into much of the content of the defining guide here. We presented on that last month, and again, follow the Reading League. I'm sure we'll present on it again if you're interested in more about the contents of the defining guide. But we did want to share the definition. So I'm going to ask everybody to just take a couple of minutes to read through the definition. If you're new to the science of reading and this is the first time that you are reading the definition, what's surprising to you? What pops out to you? What are some ahas for you? If this is more familiar to you, what are some things that you use when you talk to people about the science of reading? What are some of those words and phrases? And what I'm going to ask you to do is, as you read through, type in those words, but don't press enter yet. We're going to do a waterfall response so that we can see everybody's response at once. So I'm going to give everybody 1 minute to read, type a couple of words, and when I tell you, then you will hit enter. All right, you guys can go ahead and press enter. What are some of those words and phrases that pop out?
We got a waterfall of responses. It worked.
Great. I can't see the chat, so do you mind reading just a few of them?
Most effectively teach, scientifically based. That's a good one. The word evidence, prevention, brain-based, 5 decades, preponderance. That's 5 decades with 5 exclamation points. Vast, capitalized, body of research. Yes, that's really all it is. It's a body of research. The key word in there is scientifically based. It's a kind of research that we're specifically talking about. Yeah, Angie says she's still baffled how we've had it so long and we didn't surface it sooner. Fantastic.
So as you can see, those are some surprising things for folks. If you're having conversations, if people may have some misconceptions. So we urge you to use this definition to your benefit so that folks will understand that when we're talking about the science of reading, we are talking about the research. This is the only other page from the defining guide that I will share, because some of those misconceptions that you'll hear about the science of reading are listed here. And it is just not true. The science of reading is not an ideology or philosophy. It's not a fad. It's not a trend. As Angie said, it's not a new idea. 5 decades, that's not new. A political agenda. It is not a political agenda, right? We have folks from all political neighborhoods that understand the value of evidence-aligned instruction. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is not a program of instruction, right? It's not a curriculum. And my friends, this is so important. Please shout it from the rooftops. The science of reading is not a single specific component of instruction, such as phonics, okay? As you'll see, as we dive into the curriculum evaluation guidelines, we have research to support many elements of literacy instruction, much beyond phonics. So let's get into it. And what I always like to do is actually put a +1 in the chat if you have heard any of these mischaracterizations of the science of reading in your conversations. And please help us to address these misconceptions and help folks understand that the science of reading is the research, this consensus that has been drawn from 5 decades, this preponderance of research. I'm assuming, Maria, there's a couple of ones showing up, a couple of +1s?
About 100 of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Maria, who do we listen to?
Okay. Our elders and who else? Who do we listen to? Good question, Carrie. The knowledge that we get from the science of reading, the reason why it is a distinct style of doing research, it's because it's the kind of research design that can answer questions of correlation, causality, etc. Which of these two programs works better? Which approach? Who does it work best for? Those are actual questions that beg answers, and there isn't another kind of research that answers that. Other kinds of research can answer research questions that the scientific approach cannot answer. So we need them all. One is not better than the other, but there's only one that's good at doing what we need it to do, which is to answer specific questions, because it has a way of really isolating effects. So because we have the science of reading that has built upon multiple studies, it's not like one study found one thing. Dozens and dozens and dozens from attacking the question from different angles with different populations over time. That is a body of research that is pretty darn reliable. And it's especially amazing when it does converge. And we never like to say that science is settled, but we do know some things that are for sure. And those are in the defining guide as well. And I did the second bullet already. Another nice thing about the science of reading is that you can replicate the findings or generalize them to different populations. So in each of those, if you were to go back to that slide with all the journals and pick one and grab an article about reading research, in that article, they tell you exactly how they did it. We did this is the test we use, this is how many kids, we did it using these questions, etc. Whatever they did, they tell you so that you can also take it if you're a scientist and say, well, I wonder how it works on this population of people, or people with dyslexia, or adults, or college students, etc. And the designs are pretty rigorous, so they get published in peer-reviewed journals so that we can be pretty sure that some experts who are blinded, they don't know who wrote the article, they don't know who did the study, the person who did the study doesn't know who reviewed it. This blind approach to review allows experts to really demand as much rigor as possible so that there aren't, to try to remove any holes from loopholes or problems, and we can rely on them more. Reliability depends on that. They use assessments on students that are reliable and valid. That means given repeatedly, you're going to tend to get the same results. Or if different assessors give the child or person a test or an assessment, they're the same results are likely. It's not like a child's going to get a 10 on a test today and 110 on it tomorrow. And then the assessments measure what they're supposed to assess. There are some programs out there that are not aligned with the science of reading, and yet they publish research showing that their program is effective, but they don't use valid assessments. So dig into that. What assessments did they use? Usually one of their own that they designed that doesn't have reliability or validity. And again, the peer-reviewed piece I already touched upon. So we're good on some of the things that make scientific approach or something you can listen to because of that reliability aspect. Okay, consider conflicts of interest. Absolutely. I alluded to that already too. If curricula publishers are saying, yes, it's reliable effective, look at some of those things we just talked about on the last slide. So I guess we should move on from that. I don't want to keep belaboring that point. Okay.
So now on to the topic of the evening. So I will put the link of the curriculum evaluation guidelines into the chat. I can do that. Sorry if it makes a little black box.
Nobody drops links better than you.
Thanks, Maria. So please download a copy. It is free. All it asks you for is just your name and email address so that when we have updates, we can notify you. And as you are listening, feel free to poke through on your own. We will have a Q&A at the end where we will answer as many questions as we can. So reserve your questions until the Q&A part of the presentation, or drop your questions in the chat as they come if you feel like they're going to float out of your brain, as questions often do in my brain. So the first page of the curriculum evaluation guidelines is really just to set an intention that learning to read is not a natural process. This research tells us that it's really an amazing and complex process. I have a 4-year-old that's learning to read now, and it just baffles me all of the things that he needs to do in order to make this happen. It's very complex though, and it has to be built through explicit and systematic instruction. This page also mentions that foundational skills cannot be taught at the expense of language development. So that's a really important point, and a point that some folks make that speak against the science of reading, but the science of reading clearly says that we cannot develop any kind of word recognition at the expense of developing language. Also that the amount of instruction must be flexible to the student need as evidenced by their assessment. So that again addresses the misconception that this is one size fits all. No, we know the role of assessments. We know the role of being diagnostic prescriptive and using data to inform our instruction, and that is surely not one size fits all. So after that page, we have a few pages that do echo some of the content of the defining guide, including everybody's favorite rope. This is Scarborough's reading rope. And we have that there because we did want to make sure that we had a structure for the guidelines that were familiar for everybody to support our executive functioning, to organize the content of the defining guide, of the curriculum evaluation guidelines. And thus it is aligned to the rope, you'll notice. Again, we have components on this that address both word recognition and language comprehension. Again, showing that this is not just about a single specific component of instruction. We also have directions, and I know this is a lot of text on a page, but please don't be like my 10-year-old and ignore the directions part. These are important to read. We wanted to make sure that we spoke to the process of gathering materials, which is important. It's an important consideration. Reviewing an entire curriculum can be overwhelming, and I'll touch on that on the next slide a little bit more. It also discusses the structure of the curriculum evaluation guidelines in greater detail, and it makes clear in number 4 that it's really important to prioritize for this resource specifically to look for red flags. Those are the practices that are not aligned to the science of the reading. Practices that evidence shows are less effective for students and do not lead to building skilled reading. So there is no perfect curriculum. This tool is not, if you see a red flag, you can't just take that curriculum and throw it in the garbage, right? If you see just one, there's no perfect curriculum, and we know that. So these are guidelines, right? We changed the name from tool to guidelines. They're guidelines to guide you to finding the red flags and making that decision as a team, whether this is the curriculum for you or not. And Maria, jump in whenever you want. So,
Carrie, one question that I'm not able to answer because I just don't know is, will there be a recording or these slides available after? And then if we can
you
just
have a recording that I will do my due diligence to send out to everybody that registered.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt your flow.
Interrupt me anytime, Maria. Although this is not written on the directions, we wanted to make mention of this because it's something that we've learned, and we'll talk more about other things that we've learned along the way. Consider appointing a team lead. This is a challenging task. And on the directions page, it says to really carefully consider your team, but think about a team lead that can kick this work off by being the person that will actually go through the curriculum in its entirety and narrow down the materials. For example, for some of the word recognition components, you may look at the foundational skills scope and sequence, and that will give you adequate information. For the writing section, there may be a specific part of the lesson that is dedicated to writing. So it's really helpful to have a team lead that goes through that ahead of time. It's just going to save you a lot of time. And also, when you are building the team, do take care and consider several things as you're building the team. Some questions that we thought it would be helpful to ask. Are there team members with expertise in the science of reading? And a good way to check that is to go to the glossary and are you familiar with most of the terms? Do you know what a phoneme is and how to locate it? We know that probably everybody on this call does, but we just, make sure that there is somebody on the team that understands what those terms are, because otherwise it's challenging to search for them. Also think about how much knowledge building will need to occur before using the curriculum evaluation guidelines. You may want to do a pre-team training to explain some of the terms and what they may look like in the curriculum. Also consider, are there going to be school or district leaders, LEA leaders on your team? You want decision makers to be a part of your team. So once you have found the red flags or aligned practices, they'll have a better understanding of why you are recommending or not recommending a particular curriculum, and hopefully support your decision. And also to expand on that, not just a single school leader, but also leaders across tiers of curriculum. This is really intended for a tier 1 curriculum review resource. But you want to make sure that you have members of the team across tiers, because obviously if you have evidence aligned practices in tier 1, that is a great step. But if they go to a tier 3 and they're being taught something else, the kiddos are just going to be confused, and that's going to clog the system. So think about having representatives from all tiers. And also, if anybody else has gone through this process and you have other considerations of what to think about, who to have on your team, please drop them in the chat. We would love to learn from you as well. So the structure of the guidelines, and I will share my screen and we'll go through the guidelines, the entire document, not line by line. Don't worry, I'm not going to have you here for 5 hours. But just so you know, the structure is such that we begin with non-negotiables. These are the components that if you see these red flags persistent in the curriculum, that's when you want to really consider your options. Is this really a curriculum that you want to be using if these major red flags are evident and truly integral to the curriculum? And we have these for each section. Underneath that, we then have the more specific indicators. And again, this tool has been developed specifically to look for those red flags. And so that's why you'll see the check boxes next to the red flag indicators. Absolutely, we welcome everybody to use those evidence-aligned components if you want to dig deeper to find how many evidence-aligned components there are, or if you're new to the science of reading and you're wondering what the opposite of these red flags are, what good instruction is, we've included them here.
Carrie, do you want to go a little bit more into, in case anyone has an older version of how these used to look, how we used to have green flags and how that led to some problems in this newer version, or?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to share some of that?
I guess I can. It's kind of, I'm perfectly capable. So the first iteration of these guidelines, when it was called the curriculum evaluation tool, we had red flags and also green flags. The problem with that is we were learning that people who were using them does not, or when they were using them, they were evaluating the curriculum for, or rejecting them, say, if they didn't have all of the green flags. So, you know what I mean? So that was a problem. The red flags are meant to say, whoa, if these are here, be looking somewhere else, right? We're trying to at least avoid adopting a curriculum that is not aligned with the, these are the ones, if it's in here, likely it's not aligned with the science of reading. There are a lot of fabulous, amazing curricula out there. The Reading League stays as agnostic as possible. You can't call us. You can't ask us which one we should use. We don't do that with our partner districts that we're in. We will not tell you what to use. We say to you, build your knowledge. And because no curriculum is going to be the Band-Aid. The best curriculum in the world doesn't have the ability to solve, close these gaps. You need one. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. What you need is knowledgeable practitioners. I encourage everyone who's here tonight to poised to start choosing a curriculum to make sure that you don't do that at the expense of not giving your teachers the time and attention and to really develop professional knowledge, because that thank you for the applause. That is an applause-worthy statement. It's critical. You've all seen the same curriculum that is awesome and used in school A and school B down in the next town, and one gets wildly wonderful results with it and one doesn't. And what is always the factor there? Knowledgeable practitioners. So we don't want to depend on the curriculum to do the job. It is a tool, but it's got to be a good tool. So that's why we then said in this iteration, let's get rid of green flags so people don't only focus on them. One more thing about curriculum, they're all fantastic and awesome, many of them. But they're all different, right? You cannot find a perfect one. There's no perfect snowflake. There's no perfect curriculum. They will always miss a little of this or a little of that, and that's okay. And like it says in the directions you have to read, make sure when you see something that, ooh, they don't really have this. Well, now you've got knowledgeable practitioners. They'll know how to supplement that and make sure that it does get included. All right, so I use the analogy all the time. My husband and I both bought a brand new car the same year, within months of each other. I paid mine off first, so yay. But we always get in each other's cars. I'm like, your seats are so comfortable. Your suspension's so nice. Mine, I get car sick. You know, why don't I have this and you have that in the auto start? That's okay. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect car, a perfect house. So that's the thing. You get the one as best as you can for what you need, and then add on the things with your knowledge, if so. But the red flags, okay, there, overdid it, as I always do.
That's okay. I wanted to add knowledgeable teachers and also skilled coaches. I think that's a huge part of the implementation of these practices.
Okay, thanks for answering questions in the meantime.
You got it. All right, so now I am going to flip over to my tab and make my screen a little larger so that we can look at the guidelines themselves. So we already went through these beginning pages, and hopefully everybody has scrolled through on their own. Hopefully I won't make anybody too seasick by scrolling through. So we begin with word recognition and word recognition non-negotiables. What are some of those non-negotiables? We'll go through only the non-negotiables of each section. And if you have questions about them, again, reserve them or pop them in the chat. So if you see evidence of the queuing systems, we know from lots and lots of research that asking students to take their attention off of the text when developing decoding strategies specifically is not effective. If you are seeing evidence of a whole word approach where you are students are being asked to memorize whole words, that's a big red flag. If you do not have a systematic scope and sequence or opportunities to practice elements of instruction, that is also a big red flag. We know from research the importance of explicit, systematic meaning, simple to complex, using a scope and sequence instruction with lots of practice for kiddos. Underneath that, you have more specific indicators, red flags for phonological and phoneme awareness, for phonics and phonic decoding, and for fluency. Okay, fluency instruction is highly supported by research. And that's our word recognition section. For this tool, we did combine the non-negotiables for language comprehension, reading comprehension, and writing. We had 3 separate sections, and we found that they were a little redundant, and this sweetie pie of a resource is already a lean 24 pages. So we wanted to make sure that we were as concise as possible. So you'll see red flags that are for all 3 sections and some that are more specific. Some folks wonder about the difference between language comprehension and reading comprehension. And if you look on Scarborough's rope, right, word recognition and language comprehension are skills that become more strategic and intertwined to develop reading comprehension. And so language comprehension is really comprehending our spoken language, which is a really essential skill to have in your curriculum. Teaching word recognition, again, cannot be done at the expense of developing language and your understanding of the structure of our language. When you are asking students to apply that understanding in reading, then that becomes reading comprehension. So some of the more important red flags are that the instruction, especially in the early grades, is primarily a workshop approach that emphasizes student choice and implicit or incidental or embedded learning. So that is, where you see just, choose your just right book. What are you motivated or excited to read as the only elements of instruction in that curriculum? Because then we miss out on the opportunities for students to perhaps practice the code and decodable texts, perhaps be exposed to more rich content knowledge in content area texts and more complex texts. So that is a red flag. Again, if then that kind of bleeds into the next non-negotiable. Students are not exposed to rich vocabulary, complex syntax, and reading and writing materials. We want to make sure that we are not just teaching our students simple language through leveled text. Comprehension activities focus mainly on assessing whether students understand the content. So that's the product of comprehension. Are you only assessing students on whether they learned the content of what they just read instead of supporting the process of comprehending texts? Another red flag is that writing is not taught. We know how highly reciprocal written expression is to reading comprehension. So if it is missing from the curriculum, that is certainly a red flag. Writing is not talked about nearly enough, from my opinion. So we wanted to make sure that that was up here in the non-negotiables. You need to include writing. Or the other piece of that red flag is if it's taught separately from reading at all times. We want to use and leverage writing as a way of comprehending what we're reading. Another red flag is questioning during read alouds focuses mainly on lower level questioning skills. There's a lot of research to support questioning that tackles those higher level skills. So then we have the indicators for language comprehension. And again, this aligns with the rope. So we have background knowledge, we have vocabulary, we have knowledge of language structures, we have verbal reasoning, and we have literacy knowledge. And I wanted to name that throughout this tool, we also do include some indicators that are targeted to the older grades 3 through 5. And we also do have indicators that are specific to multilingual learners. For example, for vocabulary development, instruction in English language development is included. You'll see that throughout. In background knowledge, we name that it is important to provide opportunities whenever possible to build background knowledge in a student's home language, so that we can see that positive transfer from their language to the new language of English that they are learning. Okay, so that's our language comprehension section. Then we have our reading comprehension section. We have our red flags there, and aligned practices. We have our writing section that is further broken down into handwriting, which is an essential foundational literacy skill. We have spelling. One of my favorite things in the world is spelling assessment and instruction. Such a cool peek into the kids' brains. And composition. And then our final section is section 5, and this is assessment. And we have this note here because most assessment systems aren't part of the curriculum packages. For this section, we ask folks to review any assessments that are included with their curriculum materials along with your entire suite of assessments, because we know how integral and important assessment is to instruction. We wanted to make sure that it's included because there is a lot of research to support this. So some of our non-negotiables are that the red flag is if assessment measures comprehension only without additional assessment measures to determine what's leading to comprehension weaknesses. We do have a tool linked there that unfortunately is no longer available. I apologize about that. You can reach out to AIM if you would like to request a copy. I'm not sure if they are giving that out or not, but that link is no longer available. So apologies about that. Assessments include miscue analysis, in which misread words that have the same meaning are marked as correct, right? And then finally, the non-negotiable red flag is assessment data is vague and not used to guide instruction and intervention across a multi-tiered system of supports. So what are you using your assessment data for? So that's the basic structure of the curriculum evaluation guidelines that are currently online. I think that this is now, we have time slotted for some Q&A, and then we'll share the exciting updates that will be coming. So Maria, any good questions in the chat, or would anybody like to raise their hands to ask a question?
We need a couple more hours. No, it's not true, but we need some more time. Very happy that we're focusing on process and included that. Someone said, how was this developed in addition to using the science of reading? Did you look at different curricula to identify the strongest components? Carrie. Oop.
Can you repeat that one more time? In addition to the research, did we look at curriculum?
Did we look at different curricula, and I love that they use the plural correctly, to identify the strongest components? I'm such a nerd.
Well, I was one member of the team, and I know that there were many members of the team that were very familiar with curriculum. Some had contributed to, had been on advisory boards. We were all very familiar with curriculum. Myself specifically, I worked at the Rhode Island Department of Education, and I was very familiar with many of the high quality curricula that are named on ed reports. So feels like forever ago when we made the first version of this, but surely we were informed by what we knew to be evident in tier 1 curriculum. But really it was mostly about what the research shows.
That's nice. We have another question. These are in no particular order, folks. I'm going to start going back. Did you find that team members sometimes need explanation of miscue analysis or are most familiar with that term?
When I went through this process with districts when I was at RIDE, I did have a presentation that I had put together where we built some knowledge ahead of time. I had a recorded presentation first that I had sent out to schools and districts to watch ahead of time to describe what some of these terms were. Because it is a lift, especially if you don't know the terms. So it's highly possible. It depends on your school, your district, what ed prep program they came from and what they learned. Feel free to answer some of these questions too, Maria.
Oh, I will. I've been trying to answer some in the chat too. Do you recommend a particular number of participants for the team?
That's an interesting question. I would say I've seen it work well with between 4 and maybe 10 max. If you have, the more people you have, the easier the workload. I've seen folks divide it up by grade levels. So, but again, you might have done it in a larger group and it might have been successful, but typically the discussions can kind of go on and on and on and on if you have a larger group. So just making sure that you have a really nice and knowledgeable small core group, but enough to be able to really go into the content. You don't want to do it on your own. You can do it on your own, but it's so nice to have people to discuss this with, right, Maria? As we've seen in our pilot discussions, because somebody might catch something that somebody else didn't, and just to kind of talk through some of the components. It's really helpful to have at least 3 people.
Oh, I like this. Are you done, Carrie? I found a good question.
I'm done.
No, you're not. Do you recommend giving the SEG to teachers ahead of time to understand and grow knowledge before listening to curriculum vendors?
By the way, the SEG is our
acronym.
Curriculum evaluation guidelines, because you all know that C is soft before E, so it would be SEG and not.
We all know that. So the answer to that question is 100%.
Yeah.
Again, the Reading League cannot stress enough: knowledge first, then adopt a curriculum. You can adopt a curriculum, and if your educators don't have the knowledge of why something is in a particular order, why something so critical is only 5 minutes long and shouldn't be skipped, all of that, it should not, the tool is meant for knowledgeable users. Think about who developed it. Knowledgeable people. And so they took a lot of time and years to thoughtfully include certain components and words and assessments It's not meant to just be used, lock and load, turn the page, read it in front of kids at 8 a.m. or 9. It's meant to be used by people with a lot of knowledge. So you have to build that in first. When we have partnerships, long-term partnerships with districts across the country. We're in many dozens of districts, and before we even establish a relationship with a district, we ask them to spend a year developing professional knowledge first. Then they may want to adopt a program or even reevaluate the one they have and keep it. But and then we back out and we say, now you go, you have the knowledge, bring your publishers in. You know what to look for now. You know those critical things that have to be there. You know what better not be there. And then you choose one. And now that team of people, including teachers in the classroom who will be using it, have ownership. And then you super trained from, we will recommend the best trainers from different curricula publishers if we know them. But there's a lot to think about. Okay, I want to get back to more people's questions. How are we doing for time? We're never doing good because
we're right up to it. We still have about 10 minutes, and I will stop sharing for just a second to grab that link to the curriculum evaluation guidelines and share it. And while you were talking about the importance of building knowledge, I had a rally cry that I made up for a summit that I presented at, and it was just knowledge construction before instruction. It was nice, short, sweet. So if that's one of your takeaways for today, that would be really excellent. Knowledge construction before instruction.
I always use this analogy. I'm tired of giving it because it seems boring. I've given it so much, but maybe it'll give you the point. If we were to have be establishing a surgery unit in a country, like a MASH unit, and we bring surgeons from around the world, and only 30% of our patients are surviving. You notice I use that number on purpose, right? That percentage. That's about how many of our students are, doing, proficiently reading. And 70% of our patients were dying post-operatively. What would we do? Would we give the surgeon more things? Would we give them more scalpels? Would we give them more lights? Is that what they need? Things? No, they need knowledge. Why did that patient die? Why is that patient not progressing? What's going on? Blood clotting, infection, right? Phoneme awareness, phonics, whatever. What's going on? Language. And then, you can teach a child to read actually, with a stick and a beach in a sense. You don't want to do that, but that would be very desperate. It's the teacher, the deliverer, the practitioner, the professional that needs to be made as knowledgeable as possible. So I always worry when I hear we're going to buy a new curriculum. We've got ESSER funding. We need to do this. We're ready. We want to do the science of reading. And we think that means do it with a program. Yes. But knowledge first. Okay. If
there's so many great questions, and certainly you can feel free to email us after. One question that came up is if this, and there's no such thing as a silly question, Steve, please. Does this also work for intervention programs in addition to tier 1 programs? So the reason why this is really intended for tier 1 is we want you to look at all of these components, and an intervention may not be for all of these components. It may be specific to a component. So you certainly could use a section to check to see if there are red flags in the section that is directly correlated with what the intervention is trying to intervene. For example, if it's a fluency intervention, if it's a word recognition intervention, if it's a vocabulary building intervention. I don't know, there's too many of those, but you could use the specific components of the curriculum evaluation guidelines. They were not intended for that, but they could be used in that manner.
Carrie, did you want to say what's happened? Someone asked what's changing in February. And
yes.
Thank you.
So let me switch over to that to make sure that we get to it. We wanted to let you know, be the first to know that we have a new version, and it is almost exactly the same content-wise because, as Maria often says, the science thuds, right? We do learn new things from time to time. We have conversations, some things shift a bit, but really these red flags we've known for quite some time and they're not going to change. So the content and the structure will largely remain the same. You'll notice, however, that there are little numbers next to each component now. And what we have done is we have worked with a wonderful consultant, Dr. Doreen Maisie, and she has spent a long time adding citations that will align with each section of the curriculum evaluation guidelines. So this right here, what you're seeing in these citations, this is the science of reading. This is the high quality peer-reviewed research, right? Not, a curriculum-based measure of their own progress. This is the high quality peer-reviewed research that is the science of reading that proves that that these red flags are less effective than these aligned practices. So I am going to very briefly, this is why it's called a teaser, I'm going to tease you. Please don't take screenshots, but this is all of the research that we will be citing that will correspond and align to the components of the curriculum evaluation guidelines. We knew of this research, but we did not have it on the resource. But we feel as a leader in the science of reading space, we need to provide tools where folks can say, okay, this is a red flag because here's the research, because here's the science behind it. And this is where you can go and you can see the studies and the effect sizes and the meta-analyses that prove this to be true. So we're really excited about providing that to you. At the same time, we have an amazing pilot group that is going through the curriculum evaluation guidelines and using it. And so we're tweaking the language just a bit because there's some components that we thought were a little vague and hard to actually look for. And this process is hard enough. We want to make it easier on you. And I guess I should say that if anybody has gone through this process and they found specific components or language to be challenging or difficult, email us and let us know, because that will inform perhaps this version, perhaps future versions. We want this to be as user-friendly as possible. So that's the new and exciting version that will come out. I see lots of
Carrie,
activity in the chat.
A quick comment on why we prioritize tier 1 at the Reading League and not intervention. We will do an intervention evaluation tool eventually, I'm sure. But right now, tier 1 is critical, right? Tier 1 is like where it has to happen. You're not going to get to the bottom 20% if you're not going to get to that 85% without the bottom 20%. And a lot of the problems we have with having so many kids needing tier 2 is because tier 1 isn't solid. So again, in our experience in our partner schools that we work with, they're so happy to build the knowledge and then get tier 1 and they're like, now tier 2. And we're like, how's tier 1 doing? Are we getting the results we need? No, we're still at blah, blah, blah. All right, then tier 1, we got to find where there's gaps, where there's light coming in, plug those holes, and really solidify that. And we're going to capture a lot more success that way. And then even by virtue of the PD and the tier 2 even cleans up on its own because they know what they shouldn't be doing with tier 2 as well.
I wanted to share one other thing that will be in a little bit more distant future, but for our pilot, we did develop a workbook. And so we hope to have this hosted on the Reading League website in the not quite as near future. I cannot commit to a date. I'm not sure because this is still being tweaked and worked on and will continue to be tweaked in a next phase of our project. So again, follow the Reading League on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to find out about these updates. Even YouTube, we've got great resources, great free resources and short videos on YouTube. But there will be some sort of component that will help you determine, instead of just a yes or a no, there will be a gradient. So perhaps there is no evidence of the red flag whatsoever. Maybe there's a little bit of evidence, right? Maybe it's mentioned once or twice, but it's something that teachers can ignore. You can acknowledge and advise teachers to ignore, right? So in that instance, it would get like a little light pink, right? Or, you know, maybe this is pervasive and you're going to go for the solid red flag. And it's our hope that by having something that's color coded and on more of a gradient, then you'll be able to look at it. You'll have a visual of how much, you know, a sea of red this is, how much of a sea of blue, and then that will hopefully help your team. And there's also spots to write notes, including specific locations, where you found it, and justifying your response. So that will be coming in the not so near, but in the future.
And Carrie and some of our reviewer team will be at our conference in October doing a special session on this. I know this is too long for some of you to wait, but it would be great if you do come to the conference and you've used the tool to come in and join the conversation and help. I did enter, you know, we are working on the reliability of this tool, but we always ask schools, if you end up using this tool, and you want to send us a copy of your sloppy handwritten notes or whatever, we'd love that. You know, write the name of the curriculum on the top, don't identify anything else, and send us your results. And it'll be nice to have piles of different ones and say, wow, this lined up perfectly for almost everybody. And, you know, and it allows us to see where things might have veered too, because we want to make the tool as strong as possible. So far it's looking good though.
Yep. I'm going to put a couple other links in the chat. Should we let folks know about our amazing summit coming up?
Go for it. Yes.
If we have any friends that are joining us, particularly from the West Coast, and you're wondering when the heck the Reading League is going to be coming further west, the answer is March 25th. We will be having a summit in Las Vegas.
Please make sure to mute.
Yeah, I'm trying to see who the culprit is. We'll be having a summit in Las Vegas, and it's going to be the first of its kind. We are going to be inviting experts, really exciting neuroscientists, researchers, and experts from the field of the science of reading to have open and productive discussions with experts from the multilingual learner field. So it will be a collective knowledge building experience, with the goal of finding alignment. So this is not a place where you will, you know, leave feeling like, you know, you heard a lot of argument. This will be a true attempt to find concrete alignment, and hear discussions between people and among people that have not typically conversed and discussed their immense knowledge. So we're really excited about that. We're going to have 4 panels. One will be on the neuroscience of language and literacy. One will be on policy to support all learners. One will be on foundational skills, and one will be on English language development, vocabulary, and background knowledge. So let me find the link to that so everybody can check that out. Anything else you wanted to mention, Maria?
So much.
I know, and there's so many questions we didn't get to.
Well, we'll have to
Sorry.
do quick answers to them and put them on the website or Facebook group. And then
Oops, that was my Yahoo search. Sorry. That's probably not helpful. Let me give you the actual link to the summit.
how to make macaroni and cheese. What?
I guess right click on Google doesn't work.
Oh,
Yeah, please check out the summit. It's going to be really exciting and different. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Sue. Hey. Thanks, Sue. All right. Yes, we'll try to answer some more questions on Facebook, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to stop the recording.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks for attendance.
Hi, Tiffany. He's cute. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Good luck with all your work.